Growth Mindset. 7 secrets to destroy your fixed mindset and tap into the psychology of success with self-discipline, emotional intelligence, and self-confidence. Written by Timothy Willink, Growth Mindset Academy. Narrated by Tom Haig. Introduction. So often we hear that we should dismiss our fixed mindset and open up to growth instead. Usually many people pay little attention to this advice and chalk it up to the same breed of uselessly positive jargon, which will have no effect on our lives in the long run. However, the power of a growth mindset often means the difference between a person who can reach their goals and someone who always falls short. So, as much as we hear all these words, what do they actually mean? What's the real difference between growing always and being tethered to the ground you walk on? In most media we consume, we may see the stereotype of a genius character that doesn't let himself be tethered by the ideas of what should and shouldn't be how we should act. Some people demonize this kind of person and criminalize the act of rebelling against the standards set for us. Others, however, feel that there may be something to the theory that everything we do and know is wrong. It's these people who reject our reality and substitute their own interpretation of it, who find it easier to adapt to a growth mindset. However, you don't need to be a mad genius to fit a growth mindset into your daily life. Everyone and anyone can benefit from developing a growth mindset, and defeating your fixed mindset is a change which will benefit every kind of person, every personality, all walks of life, in everything they do. It's not easy to dig yourself out of an emotional pit of a fixed mindset, but it can be done with a little bit of determination. Another stereotype we see in so much media, which is represented, although dramatized, by real people around us, is the classic example of the cynic. They have some kind of event in their past or with their life which has generally negatively affected them. They feel as though everything they do will land them back in the exact same spot in which they began. The cynic is also a fatalist, always believing that something that happens to them is always out of their control, and that everything they ever do is destined to fail or be defeated by the will of someone else. Sometimes, people like this become annoyed by optimists who don't think the way that the cynic does. While the cynic is often so disillusioned with the world that they've seemingly given up on putting forth any effort at all, the eccentric optimist formats the way the world works according to others, into their own perception and plans. To them, their plans for the world are the exact way in which they believe the actual events following will fall. Oftentimes, there is absolutely nothing stopping an eccentric optimist from seizing the world, and, in the words of Thoreau, sucking the marrow out of life. The cynic is the epitome and embodiment of a fixed mindset, while the eccentric optimist experiences the peak of what we would consider now a growth-oriented mindset. Understanding the applicable difference between these two kinds of people may also help you identify where you fall on that same spectrum of growth to fix. This isn't to say that someone with a fixed mindset can never truly accomplish anything. While more extreme examples do experience that intense feeling of defeat, most don't. Most people today who experience a fixed mindset are simply following what they have been taught most of their life. If you don't succeed now, you would be better off giving up and trying something completely different. Because of the way most of the education system functions, we seem to prioritize the efficiency of the future workforce above actually educating children and seeing them grow into that workforce. The student who is immediately successful is rewarded more than the student who fails over and over again before succeeding, even though the first child didn't actually learn anything in the process. People who have a fixed mindset may not always feel stuck in one place, but they may feel as if they have no room for improvement, or have a hard time understanding the concept of personal growth. This is normal for many children, but those individuals who grow into adults with this sentiment can have trouble progressing through any part of their life. This includes work, higher education, or even their love life. After all, why would you want to be with a partner who seems to have no ambition for bettering themselves and changing? We don't understand ourselves very much these days. The world is so fast-paced and, for many, that's extremely overwhelming. The bustle of daily life is simply too much for many people to handle without help from others. Those other people are very different from you. Whether they have a growth mindset themselves or not, they're different from you and behave differently from you. Therefore, sometimes you have to meet in the middle for the people you love. Making that effort to compromise and change the way you think, even if just a little, for them will mean the world to them and to you. That small shift may cause a chain of events which forever changes the way you perceive the world. That small shift may also end up coming round full circle and helping the person you changed a little to begin with. It's a very important part of our daily evolution. Scientifically speaking, humans are done evolving for right now. According to any biology textbook you pick up, we haven't had any drastic evolutions in a while. However, the human race always changes a little. Every person on Earth, whether they like it or not, /know it or not, makes those same tiny shifts throughout their lives to accommodate for choices they make and people they surround themselves with. It's hard to make all those changes so suddenly, so they take place over a massive stretch of time instead. Of course, even people with very fixed mindsets can make those small changes often. They make these changes because they don't really recognize that they're happening. If a very close friend of yours has a certain funny habit, you may pick it up without noticing it. That small social adaptation is the kind of thing that we do throughout our entire lives in order to keep up with and understand the world. No matter how much you may think that nothing you do is permanent, many of those social adaptations follow you through your entire lifespan. Even though most of this change happens in our childhood, or when we're otherwise fairly young, no one is resistant to change. And the truth is that we are still evolving every day in adulthood. No matter where in your life you are, or what you may be heading toward, you are always changing, and you hopefully always will be changing. This change is what allows you to learn more about yourself and the people you surround yourself with, and it allows you to increase your quality of life, depending on how you adapt to those things. We change every day. If we don't change, the world changes with us, and we're always left in the dust. If you don't want to be left in the dust of people you care about, read further and understand more about yourself and what it means to understand a growth mindset, and how to implement it into your personal world. Thank you. Xavier K. Fenejo. Growth versus fixed mindset. Now that we've gone over some of the classic examples of people who exhibit either an intensely fixed mindset or a very growth-oriented one, what's the actual difference between these two, and where may we see them in everyday life instead of in a novel? Put simply, someone with a fixed mindset is someone who exhibits a lot of defeatist/fatalist attitudes, who feels as though nothing they do is permanent, and that no matter how much they try, their built-up skill will never be enough to match the people with talent. People with a fixed mindset sometimes can have fairly low self-esteem, and are maybe unconfident in their skills and abilities. They feel as though everything they do is destined to fail, and be defeated by someone with natural talent. The fixed mindset is not necessarily depressed, but someone who doesn't feel that their talents can change or develop. Because we grow up in a world surrounded by people who get by based only off their talent, it isn't unreasonable to think that many people feel discouraged by these individuals who don't have to work for fame or attention from others. If you're someone who wants to desperately play a professional sport, and you're someone who practices relentlessly day in, day out, the last thing you need is to be shown up by someone who does the bare minimum and makes up for their lack of work in pure talent. Seeing someone like that can be really infuriating. But don't be discouraged by what another person does to try and upstage you. Often, people who begin to fly on talent alone only sail smoothly from the beginning of their career. Later, if those same people don't also develop good work habits and good skills, they crash and burn. Someone who exhibits more of a growth mindset is more confident in themselves and their abilities, finds they are more able to make clear and rational decisions that aren't clouded by their judgment, and is normally more guided by the hope of improvement than the anger they feel toward the people who are given the natural advantage in life. Someone with a growth mindset knows that they are more than capable of always growing and improving. They know just how hard it can be, but they know that the reward for the effort is the growth itself and the satisfaction that comes with that growth. Someone with a growth mindset isn't necessarily talented either. The difference between the growth mindset and the fixed one is not that the person with the growth mindset is talented. The difference is that the person with the growth mindset wants to work hard, so that they can feel satisfied and know their own growth instead of measuring their growth next to the growth of people who are already very talented. This person knows how to feel more secure in their own abilities, unlike the fixed mindset who so often feels the need to prove themselves to those around them, for fear that they may find themselves falling behind their peers. This fear drives the fixed mindset to fight tooth and nail for everything. Although this is an improvement in its own way, it's improvement in an unhealthy way. This kind of improvement does not inspire. It is not inspired in any way by a motivation to succeed and grow within the self. Instead, there's little growth at all. No matter how much physical growth goes on within that person, there's no real mental or psychological growth. Without that emotional development, physical development is effectively useless in the long run. That's the real growth that matters, especially with regards to a fixed or growth mindset. It's all about how you grow in your head and in your heart. Although that sounds cliché, the most important part of growing as a person throughout your life is growing inside. A fixed mindset may grow physically. It may grow a massive amount physically, but they will never grow as much on the inside. A fixed mindset is just that, fixed. So it has a lower chance of ever changing or evolving, growing into a newer and better version of itself. The growth mindset is the person who looks to improve themselves constantly, who is always able to be better and to help make improvements upon others. They're more apt to tricky situations because they were raised to be self-sufficient and capable. Those who are surer of themselves and more open to growth are also often the more successful individuals in their endeavors. Part of whether a child naturally grows up with a fixed or growth mindset depends on the kind of parents that child had. If that child may have had parents who are more fatalistic themselves, they're more likely to have that same kind of attitude. Ideally, a child would have parents who foster all their hopes and dreams and encourage them to chase their desires. With this kind of parenting, more children can adopt a more hopeful outlook. A growth mindset makes a child who is able to socialize with others, someone who can be competitive and still lose fairly, and someone who can cooperate with many different kinds of people. A fixed mindset is someone who takes a much more negative approach to the competition, more often a sore loser, and usually tends to tether their self-worth to their status among their peers. This makes them more likely to suffer from a material loss or a loss relating to status. It's much harder for people with fixed mindsets to bounce back from a loss, and much easier for them to spiral. They don't know how to lose, and they don't know how to recover from a loss. This means that people with fixed mindsets are more likely to spiral, which happens when a person suffers a loss and then accidentally begins to seek out another loss because they expect it. Being caught in this vicious cycle can result in a lot of negative outcomes, most of which end up with the person being in a depressed emotional state for extended periods of time. That's really where developing the growth mindset starts. Being able to admit that you have the capability to grow. Admitting to yourself and later understanding that you can't win at everything you do will help you to foster your sense of self-worth. Many people, especially young people, tether their confidence to things like material victory, grades, or their social status. Connecting worth to things like this makes it exceedingly difficult for that person to disconnect, and then makes it harder for them to take a step back and have a more analytical look at themselves and their self-worth. In a world where children are pushed more and more to grow up fast, they often don't have as much time to learn where their worth should be tethered. Because of this quick adjustment many kids make to the world, a lot of children grow into young adults with severe issues concerning their social skills. These social skills turn out to be crucial to their development, and the hindrance of them at an early age sets them that much further back in their emotional and social development. This phase of their lives can become the one kids get stuck in for some time, making them more open to the belief that they will never progress forward. This repeated failure, or the belief of it, can quickly spiral and turn into a fixed mindset. Not only that, but it can become a fixed mindset that prevents the person from socially developing for a while. Young children don't often show whether or not they will grow into people with fixed or growth mindsets, but most children display personality traits that are commonly found in fixed mindsets because they are still in the very early stages of developing socially. They steal from others and become easily upset when they don't succeed. This frustration is found in everyone, but the ability to deal with and rationalize that frustration is what separates a healthier child from a less healthy one. In the sense of emotional and social capability, the growth mindset is the kind of child who is willing to share and who can deal with rejection from peers. A child who has trouble with that kind of thinking is more prone to being melodramatic and feeling that because they were rejected by their peers, they now have inherently less worth because of this interaction. Tethering the self-worth and confidence to social status is a massive downfall of individuals with fixed mindsets, if only because they suffer so much for it with no benefit to match it. That suffering drives the fixed mindset to fall apart at the seams, spiraling more and more into the feeling of being constantly defeated and worthless. That feeling of worthlessness, rock bottom, is the place which defines the exact difference between someone who can develop a growth mindset at that moment and someone who is still deeply entrenched in their fixed mindset. That place where everyone is in deep despair, where everything has gone totally wrong, that's the place where every motivational book and video tells you to dig deep, find out what you're made of, and so on and so forth. While hearing that mantra over and over again gets annoying, it's true that you are defined by your darkest moments. A trauma victim is not defined by their trauma, they are defined by how they respond to that trauma moving forward. Someone who simply gives up and allows that trauma, that dark place, to overwhelm their lives, is someone who may not believe that they can even get better. A victim who copes with their trauma and who acknowledges it without letting it consume them is someone who knows how to grow and move on and respond accordingly to terrible things. As often as we hear father figures say it over and over, life really isn't fair. Not at all. In the slightest. Not one bit of it is fair. You can try to make it fair, but it won't work. The thing about that is that when you see something in your life that very obviously isn't fair, you have little choice other than to press on and keep going, despite that unfairness. Think about a time when the odds were stacked against you, whether in a genuine competition or a point in your career or personal life where you felt the entire thing was rigged against you, where you felt you were destined to fail. Did you keep on going despite that adversity? If you did, you are someone who knows how to deal with adversity and overcome it. That specific point in time didn't necessarily define you as a person, but it shows that you are willing to try and overcome unfairness and adversity. This is one of the many traits that are so admirable about people with growth mindsets. It's so very easy to give up. It's not difficult to stop resisting adversity, and it isn't difficult to stop trying. It is difficult, however, to force through even though you know it isn't a good idea. It's hard to push through the adversity in your way, but somebody has to do it. Sometimes someone must be you. The goal, if you currently have a more fixed mindset, is to progress on the spectrum from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset. That can be hard, but certainly not impossible. Reading this, to begin with, shows that at the very least you have something of an interest in a growth mindset and how you can develop one. The first step of adopting a growth mindset is shaking off the effects that a fixed mindset can have on you. It's important, firstly, to make the distinction that having a fixed mindset does not make you lesser or sadder or in any way inferior to someone with a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is a mindset in which someone believes that their skills and talents are stagnant and permanent. Having a fixed mindset means some of these things for you. Having a fixed or growth mindset is not something evil, but is something to avoid. People with fixed mindsets are in no way bad people, but the ideal for any person is that they have a growth mindset so they can change and evolve as people much easier. It's a good idea to avoid a fixed mindset thought the way that you would avoid any other negative thoughts that plague your life. However, you don't need to demonize someone who is stuck in a fixed mindset themselves. It's harder for some to break out of that cycle of defeatist thinking than it is for their peers. Someone with a fixed mindset is not usually someone who is sad and bitter. Although sometimes people with severely fixed mindsets can come off as bitter and depressed, that has no correlation with the actual definition and application of fixed mindset. Those with fixed mindsets believe that their skills can't improve, not that they can never be good at anything. Try to keep this in mind when addressing someone with a fixed mindset. They aren't a lost cause or someone suffering from an illness, so don't treat them as if they're someone with a condition. From the perspective of someone with a fixed mindset who wants to foster a growth mindset, consider times in your life when you've undergone change. There are definitely many examples you could draw from, as everyone in their life goes through many different phases and changes, both physically and emotionally. These changes help you to adapt, but they also allow you to improve your existing skills. So, that in and of itself may disprove your theory that all your personality traits and intelligence are stagnant. Your brain undergoes a lot of shifts too. In more recent scientific years, we've discovered the extent to which the human mind can retain and change to suit the needs of an individual. Also referred to as brain plasticity, the ability for your brain to change drastically is also indicative that you are also subject to dramatic and great change. You become smarter even after your brain stops developing. Even though most brains stop aging around the age of 25, all brains keep going after that, as long as the brain is normal and without complication. Assuming this is the case, you still retain more and more information as you learn and grow older. So, even though your brain can change drastically in your younger years, you don't stay exactly the same in terms of intelligence afterward. Where did you think the stereotype of older people and all their wisdom came from? You are just as smart as the person sitting next to you, and that's subject to change. Scientifically speaking, your intelligence is a very fluid and kind of unreliable way of measuring how well you do in certain areas of life, which you may not ever actually encounter. You are likely just as applicably smart as anyone in the room with you, or anyone in your friend group. You may in some ways be both the smartest and the least intelligent person in your whole town or city. All of that is subject to change, so don't worry too much about it. Everything you do or don't do may have an impact on your intelligence, and it may now. Realistically, there's no true way to fairly and accurately measure the raw intellect of every human on Earth for many reasons. So the belief that your intelligence can never change is not only fatalistic, but it's scientifically void. There are many different kinds of intelligence. Whether you are socially or emotionally intelligent, book smart, or very skilled at working with your hands, you are very intelligent in some way or another. This is one of the reasons that most intelligence tests don't actually measure your true capabilities. Instead, they measure what they conceivably can and call it a day. While this is efficient, it does little to actually tell you about yourself and your room for improvement. Speaking of which, there is always room for improvement. You can't win them all. You can try and try in anything you please for as long as you want, but there's a very small chance that you'll win with your very first time. And there's also a very small chance that your winning streak will be very long in anything you do. That's purely up to simple probability, and has little to do with your intelligence or skill. You simply can't be perfect the first time you commit to a task, and you can't be perfect every time you do something. The world is in no way rigged against you if it doesn't permit you the win that you want whenever you want it. It's childish to think that you will always be the best, so try improving your skills on your off time instead. Even if that development doesn't yield many results in the way of winning medals, it will yield results for your own personal satisfaction. Your achievements should matter to you always. No matter whether or not you won, even if it's not something you can win or lose, your idea of how successful you are should never be tethered in something like social status or your place on a podium. It's the skills that you create and harness for yourself that serve you in the long term, not the medal and the plaque that you may win and be proud of at that moment. Of course, be proud of your accomplishments. Often our accomplishments let us know that our hard work is paying off, but make sure that you don't let those accomplishments define how you feel about yourself and your skills. Take pride in whatever you want. Sometimes, whether we have a growth mindset or a fixed one, we sometimes get hung up on what we can and can't take pride in. Some accomplishments may feel as though they're things we'll be laughed at or ridiculed for. However, anything you feel proud of yourself for achieving is more than enough to be proud of over. One of the main functions of society is to push down things that it deems unfit for praise. It's the prideful rebellion of people who enjoy things that are looked down upon that changes the course of that society. There are a lot of misconceptions about changing your mindset and attitude. Many people dismiss the actual weight and merit of your perception of the world and how you relate to the world. This may be because we've been treating the concept of attitude as laughable since middle school. However, as we grow older, it becomes more and more obvious that everything we do has an indirect or direct impact on the way we treat ourselves and others. So educating everyone you can about what growth and fixed mindsets actually mean can have a large impact on how we think about these mindsets in regard to our mental health as a society. It's more than okay to have a bad day every now and again. Even people who are the most motivated have terrible days throughout the course of their lives. It's something that comes naturally to nearly all people in the world, no matter how much of a growth mindset they have. Try not to let it disrupt your pattern of improvement. A bump in the road doesn't derail you. Improvement is in no way linear or constant. There is no one on earth who has tried to get better at something or heal from something who has gotten better every day. With any kind of condition, any scenario, any occurrence, people have had days where they may even get worse than where they started. Working your way through a difficult time is daunting and not something easily done alone. Trusting in people, trusting in yourself, and trusting that you know what you're doing will all be what helps you through the most difficult parts of breaking out of your unhealthy habits. With all of this in mind, move forward knowing that a fixed mindset is not a pest or a virus to get rid of. Like many things, It's something that needs to take time to evolve into something bigger and better than its original form. Sure, it can be very difficult to see the end result when it isn't right in front of you. Many challenges you face will be like a marathon, long and grueling and without any foreseeable end for a little while. However, the longer you forge onward, the closer you get to see the end. Once you see the end, the closer you get to be at that end. Even at the end, you need to keep growing and improving even past that finish line. To stop and give up after finishing would defeat the purpose of even beginning the journey in the first place. So to reach the finish line comfortably, forge on at a steady pace and try not to burn yourself out. If you work hard and pace yourself, reaching that daunting finish line may turn out to be a lot easier than you thought. Being able to grow and develop as a person, both for yourself and for others, is one of the many rewards of developing a growth mindset. Being able to adapt to different situations which you encounter in life as an adult, and being able to start harnessing the skills to do so earlier on in your life, helps you build bonds faster and be more versatile in all areas of life, from your personal relationships to the workforce. There are lots of nuances that go into breaking out of the dangerous habits that so often befall people who have very fixed mindsets. There's lots of misunderstanding of what it actually means to have a fixed or growth mindset, and it can be very difficult to dispel all of those rumors and that entire stigma. Nevertheless, taking the time to actually understand everything you can about how to change your mindset and attitude for the better will undoubtedly help you to become a better and much better rounded person. It will also, of course, help you to be more open to all kinds of growth. The 7 Rules of Growth. There are many things that go into changing yourself and your attitude for the better. As you've read, it's a slow and arduous journey for everyone who embarks on it, and sometimes it can seem as though the journey isn't worth the reward to begin with. Of course, once that destination of a growth mindset comes into view, the fruits of the labor somehow magically become sweeter very quickly. There are 7 main rules to follow while you embark on the journey to a growth mindset. These are the following. 1. Ask yourself questions. Don't relay statements. Something a lot of people with fixed mindsets do is they say things to themselves and insist on things to others that may simply not be very true at all. In fact, most statements about their abilities made by people with fixed mindsets happen to be wrong more often than right. For instance, instead of saying, "I'm not good at maths," a statement that has no basis in meaning other than the insistence of the person saying it, try asking yourself what you can do to improve at maths, or what you're doing wrong. There's so much that you can do then to solve your own problems. The issue arises when someone complains about the issues they face and yet does nothing to try and better themselves or work on solving the problem that is in front of them, and which is usually very solvable. If you feel that you have an underlying issue, don't chalk up all your misfortune related to it by casting aside all your issues. Instead, ask yourself what you can do about it, instead of passively watching your problems grow larger and more daunting by the moment. With each of those passing moments, there is also a moment that passes you by in which you can stand up and take an active role in your own life. While yes, that's very hard to do for most people, it's not impossible. It only becomes hard when you're actually forced to commit to it. Simply standing up and telling yourself that something is going to be done is the very important first step, and it's very easy in and of itself. It's the work you have to do immediately afterward that requires more precision and grueling work. Asking yourself questions you can solve, presenting yourself with fluid problems and fluid solutions helps you to move through all these problems much faster. Additionally, tack on yet to your statements if you feel the need to make them. "I'm not good at math yet" is a statement, not a question. But it's a statement that clearly alludes to the fact that you will be improving very soon. Although it isn't much, that single word can mean the difference between feeling defeated and feeling invigorated. Not being able to do something is discouraging, but not being able to do something yet can be uplifting in its own right. 2. While it's important to stay fluid, an important distinction to make between growth and fixed mindsets is that a growth mindset is informed only by data and never by any other kind of information. Keep in mind that it's still very important to keep options open and be open to information from all sources. Ultimately, however, it's exceedingly important that your opinion be well informed and based in fact alone. If you allow your information to be even partially made up of the opinion of someone else, you are likely going to be at least partially incorrect in your assumption of that situation. No matter who is involved in a certain party or situation, never trust the word of someone else, unless you can fact-check it in whatever way is easiest. Even if you hear simple news from a friend that may be important to you, look up the actual information online to be sure that you and your friend aren't being misinformed. This is in no way assuming that any one of your peers may be actually trying to trick you or manipulate you. This is simply assuming that many people in the world are mildly misinformed every day of their lives, including you and me. So make sure you do everything you can to combat that potential for misinformation. People with growth mindsets are typically more likely to be skeptical of the information they receive through word of mouth. So they're much more likely to back up thoughts with factual information instead of opinion. Of course, this makes the fixed mindset seem mildly more trusting, but not to the extent which would require the fixed mindset to completely accept everything that is told to them. This is also not assuming that fixed mindsets are gullible enough to believe anything that's ever said to them. It's only to warn against otherwise naive and sometimes gullible people. Someone with a strong growth mindset is more than willing to fact-check everything said to them by essentially everyone. 3. Small things lead to bigger things, which lead to really big things. It's easy to chalk up most things to being worthless if, on the surface, those things appear to be very small. However, compounding small things with consistency soon turns those many small things into a big thing, which is no longer insignificant, and which now has a lasting impression on your life. This is the basic method of compounding, a method which is utilized in most fields modernly. Essentially, the method begins with a small task for every day, which the user implements consistently. After that small task is easily managed, more small tasks are piled on as well. This step is repeated until most, if not all of the workload, is on the shoulders of the recipient. But they feel less stress because of that slow but steady compounding. Adding slight pressure over time will not break wood, but smashing it quickly will. So, this method of slow but steady progress works on all kinds of people with all kinds of jobs, including ones that pertain to changing your lifestyle in any way. This would, of course, expand from changing from a fixed mindset to a growth one. You could begin with a very small assignment for every day, such as teaching yourself to ask questions instead of providing statements pertaining to your skills. Over time, consistently keeping up with that habit will feel easier and easier. So, once that habit comes as second nature to you, add on another habit which will hopefully work towards breaking some of the other habits that you may have as someone with a fixed mindset. After a while, ideally, you'll be in a mental space where you're able to manage many tasks at once while keeping up with normal responsibilities. This is a more efficient and constant way of keeping yourself in check, while staying firmly on track towards your destination of a growth mindset. It doesn't necessarily matter what tier each of your daily responsibilities is, so you can make it up as you go, according to what you think you can comfortably handle. If you want more of a challenge, you can force yourself to carry out more responsibilities more often. If you have a busier workday, you can settle for a limited number of responsibilities, which you switch out for every few days. It can be hard to keep up with everything that goes on around you, and it can be very tough to keep up with your own standards for yourself. Remember that you are the one in control for your journey and your goals. So, you're also the one responsible if you fall off track. This method is for people who are absolutely committed to the growth mindset and who are able to be very responsible and consistent for extended periods of time. 4. Never ever settle for subpar work. This can be interpreted as less directed towards people with a fixed mindset and simply towards people who are lazier workers. But the phrase, "this will do," has to become your worst enemy when you want to adopt a growth mindset. Hating the idea of settling for average, settling for less, is part of what sets growth mindsets apart from the rest of the pack. While someone with a fixed mindset is more likely to settle for something they know will probably get a fine grade but isn't their best work, a growth mindset will be more inclined to go above and beyond the call of duty to fulfill and exceed the expectation they have for themselves. Because that's exactly what it means to always be growing. To always be growing and evolving and getting better means that you have to have high standards for any of your work, no matter what kind of work it is. A growth mindset is willing to put their everything, even into a relatively simple project, because they want to see if they can exceed their own expectations. An ideal growth mindset is genuinely curious to see what they can do if they invest all their energy into performing well. Of course, a lot of students and employees find it hard to suddenly switch over to this kind of energy if they've been going their entire career drifting by on something that they know is okay. They're consciously aware that they could do better, but they likely don't care enough about the final grade to put forth any more effort. So, don't make the satisfaction about the grade or the expectation of a superior authority. Instead, make the reward for an outstanding job something physical if you need to, like a snack or a break from work quickly. After finishing a few maths problems, taking a moment to get up, walk around the room, and have a stretch can be so incredibly good for anyone, no matter how long they've been at the desk or what kind of work they may have been doing. Or, if you want, you can make the satisfaction something much more personal. Make the satisfaction of a job well done resonate not necessarily with the teacher or the boss, but with you. There's no one who can better predict the way you perform and feel better than yourself, nor cater to your emotional needs before the emotional requirements of people around you. 5. Really and genuinely get every single lesson you can from everything that ever happens to you. The point of living, to some, is to grow constantly and learn from everything. Adopt this kind of enthusiasm and be able to adopt every piece of advice you can possibly draw from a situation. Whether it be something more superficial, like a small misfortune, or a real and genuinely heartbreaking loss, there's something to be learned from absolutely every situation, every scenario. Look through the sequence of events and pick out what happened to you and why it may have meaning. Look for a way you can learn a valuable lesson in a situation where you feel very plainly wrong. It may be hard at first, but I promise there's something very valuable to be learned in all of these tiny defeats. Eventually, after you internalize enough of these lessons and actually put them to use, you can grow immensely as a person. You may find that after a while you see a whole new person when you look in the mirror. Sure, it's really difficult for a defeatist to look in the mirror and say to themselves, "It doesn't matter what actually happened to me if I can learn from it." This especially comes into play with a fixed mindset that loves to fixate on their own misfortune. This is not necessarily what a fixed mindset is, but the kind of person who fixates on their own grief and very rarely fixates on the issues of others is someone who most definitely has a fixed mindset. They're someone who's usually pretty unwilling to put in the effort to improve their situation because so much of their emotional revenue comes from all of their plights. Nevertheless, if you're someone who wants to be able to develop a growth mindset, actively seek out lessons in the world around you. After a little bit of practice, they become much easier to find, and you may even have learned something very sentimental to boot. Don't knock the pursuit of knowledge, no matter where that pursuit actually takes place, and what that pursuit is the pursuit of. 6. Humiliation and embarrassment are a large part of your life. It feels terrible to be humiliated by people you look up to, but throughout most of your life, it's going to happen more than once. Yes, it's something that everyone really wants to avoid, but it's unavoidable for most. So, don't feel as though you have to work every day to avoid being embarrassed or humiliated. Our current society works hard to shame people for not immediately knowing things at the exact same time as everyone else. This can really pressure that outsider, make them feel incredibly unintelligent, and force them to further isolate themselves from the pack. Additionally, there are many people who, despite people's best recommendations, may give up once they feel ridiculed. This kind of person with a fixed mindset is very likely to be found outside the back feeling sorry for themselves, because they want to wait for somebody to comfort them. The truth is, you're very rarely going to have your own personal comforter for everything you do wrong and everything you say out of place. Often, you have to bite the bullet and apologize for your own mistakes. Or, if you didn't necessarily make a mistake, but you were humiliated, you sometimes have to just keep going about your business as though everything you do is as it should naturally be. When we're embarrassed, we often get the impression that people are watching us or actively mocking us. But this isn't usually the case. Usually, it's just a matter of people being interested in what you're doing and how you're reacting. Although, usually people aren't really looking at you at all. If the embarrassment was truly over something that mattered so much, somebody would say something to you, and you may be asked to say something publicly to apologize. This is rarely the case, however, so most cases just end in feeling paranoid and as though everyone has their eye on you. We think that our public embarrassment was the highlight of that person's day, so, of course, they're watching us. However, this is rarely the case, and so the best way to deal with that familiar red flush of hot shame is to simply keep going about your day as though nothing had even happened. Eventually, anything that transpired becomes lost to time, quickly forgotten by most people in attendance. This ability to cope with loss and with embarrassment can make you falter at times. It's hard to handle that humiliation for a lot of people. However, someone with a strong growth mindset is able to push through that humiliation because of the respect they have for themselves and others, and because of their humility. 7. Finally, be open to new things, people, and experiences that may jump into your life. Some people aren't naturally extroverted, so they have trouble joining social spaces and entertaining people at the levels of some of their more socially outgoing peers. So, when a very introverted person, or even just someone who finds themselves socially awkward, comes across a person who is more than willing to befriend them and care for them, they may actually have a lot of trouble making friends with that person. Even though this very valuable thing is presented in front of you, it can be extremely difficult for someone who suffers from social anxiety, or even just a severe introvert with little social experience, to take the plunge and try to befriend them and bond with that person. They're likely someone who's tried making friends before and who may have been very harshly rejected in the past. Of course, no one wants to go through that more than they have to, so they may shut off their social impulses to everyone around them. This way, they don't even have to think about the potential of being rejected by this new person because they aren't even their friend. If anything, it's now them who are rejecting the new person walking into their life. The same principle can easily be applied to things like work ideas and advice. We usually don't really want to follow up on ideas unless they come from us, because we like to think that we're original and intelligent and creative enough to come up with something on our own all the time. This simply can't be the case every single time someone needs a new idea or advice. As much as we may want to be the most helpful, most intelligent person in the whole world, thinking we can achieve this is more than a little gullible of us. Sure, it's a nice feeling to be recognized for helping others, but it's also nice for those others to be recognized for similar actions. There's more than enough mutual knowledge, experience, and ideas in the world for more than one person to share it. Keep in mind that everyone around you has different experiences and different minds, so they're more prone to different ideas than you. You haven't experienced the entirety of history unfold, and you haven't experienced everything that's ever happened to anyone. So, it's probably significantly harder for you to come up with the kind of ideas that other people are having. At the same time, though, all other people likely have a harder time coming up with ideas like yours as well. So many people spend so much of their time chasing other people's dreams and ideas that it's hard for us to stop and appreciate our own mind and our own ideas. So, whenever you feel hopeless and jealous of the ideas of someone near you, take a moment and meditate on that feeling. Breathe deeply and reflect on yourself and why you feel the way you do. It's likely that all those jealous feelings are hurting you from the inside, and you may not have even realized it. In fact, many people who feel this way tend to drown out their own feelings with how they feel, ironically. They mask the sadness they feel when they feel like they've been outdone with the bitter anger or just the feeling of jealousy that comes with those feelings. Surely those feelings you have aren't necessarily conducive to your growth mindset or to your positive outlook on life. Therefore, try whenever you can to meditate on the things you feel. When you're able to identify exactly what you think you feel, you're also more able to figure out what you want to do about those feelings. Those feelings can be tricky and difficult to get rid of, but don't falter. As hard as it can be to get rid of those pervasive feelings of jealousy, remind yourself when you meditate on negative feelings that you are equal to all your peers in mind and in spirit. Everything you create can be just as beautiful and creative as something that comes from the person next to you. It can be hard to believe that if you're someone who is still learning how to untie their self-worth from their materialistic achievements. But working at it a little bit each day is the best way for you to improve quickly. That improvement may be the exact thing that unlocks the door to your growth mindset. Stay focused. On top of all these rules, something very important that should be addressed but may not necessarily need to be added as a rule. Take care of yourself and love yourself in any way you know how. There are so many ways in which you are someone very worthy of love and support, and there are so many ways in which you should practice self-love and self-care. Those with very fixed mindsets, and even those who are hyper-fixated on growth, may find themselves neglecting themselves and their responsibilities to themselves and their bodies. You are much more important than your grades, your achievements, and your social status. The fact that you are a living and breathing person grants you so much free will and so much capability that to squander it would be a shameful waste of ability. Even if the way you care for yourself seems small and insignificant, it's a way for you to monitor your health and practice something very important to you. Being kind to everyone includes being kind to yourself. Sometimes, people with very fixed mindsets can be very tough on themselves because they hold themselves to the same standard that they perceive everyone else to reside at. It's usually very hard to reach this pretend standard, and it's sometimes impossible for you to come close to the standard. Try your hardest to disregard the standard and instead look at yourself and say something kind. Even if your goal for the day is not to be harsh and cruel to yourself, that's enough to start out with. Working your way up, compounding, being kind to yourself is the way to truly lift yourself out of the emotional shackles that a defeatist attitude may place you into. Everything about you is fluid because you're someone very free in a very free world. Take advantage of the space you live in and try to take little moments of every single day to be kinder to yourself. These are rules to follow, but you don't have to follow all of them right away. That seems like a very laborious task all at once. So it's all right if you just skip to working at growing your skills and abilities. The people you surround yourself with and the rules they follow will also have an impact on you and your personal rules. So, try not to be too harsh on yourself or on others. Being kind is the key to growing. Much like a plant, if you refuse to water it or feed it, how can you ever expect it to grow? Conclusion. The path to growth can be daunting for many, and some people truly don't see themselves as cut out for it. At least not in this part of their life. Truly, there's no way to be completely closed off from change. It happens all around us, constantly, all the time. Change happens around us and inside us. Growth, too, happens all around us and within us, both in the physical and the spiritual. It's never a bad idea to try and make the most of this growth, really. It's unavoidable, and the world is much less rigid than it may appear. So, what of it, really? We're all just learning how to be human on Earth, and that feeling brings much camaraderie. In a way, the growth of the individual also inspires the growth of the group. Growth of the group also inspires the growth of the individual. So many people say we simply go round and round in a never-ending cycle. If we do, why are so many people hung up on change? Truth be told, people are deathly afraid of change. It's just something that happens so often in life and is so unexpected, many people are afraid of change. You are probably afraid of change to a degree. It's a simple fear and one that most people need help to overcome. Many people need to be reassured that change in their life is more positive than negative, and thinking that way brings a lot of people more joy in their lives. Their growth brings them joy. Their development as people brings them more joy than the despair brought to them by the loss they may suffer from change. In a way, people who believe they can never change simply believe that because they're afraid of change. Most, however, are simply of the belief that the world is a purely analytical place full of numbers and code. That emotion and empathy only serve as a distraction from those things. This simply isn't true, of course. It's hard to accept that things are much less black and white than we may originally think. But it's a fact that everything you experience is a mixture of those emotions and those numbers together. Many people don't want to think about the numbers and the mathematics part of life. Many other people don't want to consider the emotional, sentimental, and empathetic parts of life. These two concepts create a juxtaposition which adds color to our world, which inspires change and growth within the Earth's inhabitants. And how do we, its inhabitants, respond to that call? Hopefully, many of us respond positively, growing and flourishing, coming into our own as we age. Unfortunately, some of us do not exactly flourish at all on Earth. Many of us feel easily wronged and lament how unfair life on Earth truly is. Many try to uncover the dark secret behind society to no avail, because the secret is already out. We're both constantly open to change and constantly afraid of what that change brings us. So, I raise you this parting question. What are you chasing after? What is it that keeps you awake at night, tossing and turning, nervous to get at it? What is that ambition? Where is it? What is it going toward? Thinking about your ambition every day can hopefully serve as a good reminder to you and to others that nothing you do should be done without reason. Nothing you do should be done without passion or ambition of some kind. If you live any part of your life really without some sort of passion, you become a passive observer to everything that goes on in your life. Every relationship, every opportunity passes you by without that passion. Some people find it insanely difficult to conjure up any sort of passion for anything, really. Some other people find it simple, muscle memory, second nature to live and breathe in the heat of the moment for their entire lives. For people who don't exist for their passion, try to find it as best as you can. Once you do find it, try your hardest to latch onto it as hard as you can for as long as you can. The longer you have a tight grip on your passion, the more you can direct toward wherever you want it to lead you. You play an active role in your own life, so please don't ever be afraid to grab the bull by the horns and forge your own path. Additional questions for those who have found their passion or passions already. Do you have a passion for growth? If not, why not? Isn't growth what we're inspired by every day? Isn't growth the very thing that allows us to make friends and new connections every day of our lives? It's so difficult for us to make connections and improvements to ourselves without a certain passion for growth. So, if you don't have some kind of passion for growth, you'd do well to try and find it and take advantage of it as soon as you can. After all, growth is our drive. Growth is our life. We're always changing and evolving inside and out, trying desperately and fighting to keep up with the entire world. That can be incredibly stressful, so many of us turn ourselves away from growth in an attempt to resign ourselves to simply letting things happen to us doing nothing about it. If you think this method of dealing with your strife is going to get you anywhere, you're sorely mistaken. Resigning yourself to passive submission is the wrong way to take a break from your busy life. Instead, take care of yourself and get back up and keep going as soon as you feel ready. After all, you've got a whole world out there to grow with. Free bonus. P.S. Is it okay if we over-deliver? I believe in over-delivering way beyond our readers' expectations. Is it okay if I over-deliver? Here's the deal. I am going to give you an extremely valuable cheat sheet of accelerated learning. What's the catch? I need to trust you. You see, my team and I wants to over-deliver, and in order for us to do that, we've got to trust our readers to keep this bonus a secret to themselves. Why? Because we don't want people getting our ultimate accelerated learning cheat sheet without even buying our books themselves. Unethical, right? Okay, are you ready? Simply visit this link, http://bit.ly/accelerated cheat sheet. Everything else will be self-explanatory after you've visited http://bit.ly/accelerated cheat sheet. We hope you enjoy our free bonuses as much as we've enjoyed preparing it for you.